Welcome, listeners, to Pop Screen, some extremely ill communication. We are that corner of the Geek Show that likes to look at the good, the bad, and the preposterous of movies, either starring by or about pop stars. Another podcast covers a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, from country and western hip-hop, from documentaries to science fiction. I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a filmmaker and visual artist and a regular critic for the Geek Show, contributing to their regular Outside the Blue Box feature and also to the main Geek Show site. And I've been joined this week by
Rob Spencer. I'll even say my last name, even though it's not appearing on the screen. Yes, Rob Spencer. I am from the Caliber 9 from Outer Space podcast. Another podcast about movies, sometimes starring a musician, but quite often not.
Yes, which is, you know, where our niche comes in, really. I'd hate to have a competitor on.
Exactly. It's just like a slight overlap, so we can just about bear being in the same room together.
Yeah. Yes. Well, you actually brought this movie to my attention. I wasn't familiar with it, despite it having quite a lot of things that you would think would bring it to my attention that we'll get into. But where did you find out about Roadside Prophets?
I heard about it on a podcast years ago. I think it was the Junk Food Cinema podcast. And they said at the time, this is a ridiculously underseen film, given its pedigree and its cast and so on. Yeah, I think it's just something that it's a very much an indie boom sort of film, but I think it just missed the indie boom. I think it was just before it, so no one watched it.
It's in a kind of an odd position decades-wise. I mean, one of my other great passions other than movies, one of my other great cultural passions other than movies starring pop stars is just trying to work out the 90s. What was that whole thing about? This is very much a 90s movie, and it has a lot of extremely 90s ingredients, but very also... I thought the opening to it made it feel like the last of those kind of 80s blue-collar movies, you know, the opening scene of our hero walking out of a factory where his co-workers complaining that people are losing their fingers left and right. It's very, very They Live, very sort of Flashdance, that kind of...
Yeah, and also...
I could do a big popcorn movie and have it start in a factory.
Yeah, but it's also the start. It's like the beginning, the opening credits of Slapshot or the Dion Brothers or something like that. But it becomes something completely different. It becomes this is a weird subgenre that I've actually made a list of on Letterboxd, but it doesn't have a proper name. I called it. It's not a noir, but I've called the list Neo-Noir of the Weirdlands USA because it's just movies usually made in the 90s, set usually in the desert, usually with people traveling down a road or being lost in some way and often having fairly aimless plots, and it's just a sort of hangout thing. And that's a very long name for a genre. So I'm not sure if it's going to catch on, but I love those sorts of movies. And I think it was watching this movie that made me think, you know what? I love those sorts of movies because that's pretty much what this is.
I hotly agree. I think that a lot of what's going on in kind of 90s American indies and so the rise of those sort of mini majors like Miramax and Fox Searchlight and things is people are finally caught up with the good bits of the 80s. You know, people are finally actually watching Terry Gilliam and Tim Burton and thinking, oh yeah, why did we waste so much time watching Top Gun? But I think the movies you've mentioned are obviously kind of indebted to David Lynch, I guess.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, Wild at Heart is a core member of that group. I would say one of the prominent ones.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the other thing is that the person who is coming out of the factory and sitting on a motorcycle is the first of quite a lot of pop star connections.
Most of whom I had forgotten when I pitched this to you. I only remembered 2, and then I was watching it going, oh God, it was more than just those 2.
Yes, yeah. But this is, let me just look this up because this is not an artist I'm terribly familiar with, but it's a guy from X, isn't it? From the band X.
Yeah, John Doe.
John Doe. Yeah, no wonder I couldn't remember his name.
Yeah, is it even a name?
Is it? Yeah, very true.
He doesn't have a name.
Well, his actual name is John Nomensen Dushak, so that's why he's called John Doe.
Yeah, that's not the sort of name you normally get in a punk band. Yeah, that's the kind of punk guy that'll call himself, I don't know, Rat Scabies or something like that. I don't know what Rat Scabies' real name is, but
yeah, it's punk is great because it's easier than any other musical style to come up with a joke name for it, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
to come up with a spoof hip hop name, you have to have quite a good pun. But for punk, you can just call yourself Derek Shite, and it still basically works.
Just make reference to something unpleasant. John Doe, dead guy. Okay,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of X either, which is weird because I am quite a fan of old school punk, but I've just never really gotten into X. I've got a playlist on Spotify that I know has a couple of X songs on it. The only one I could name is Los Angeles. I meant to give them a listen before this show, but I spent my whole time listening to Beastie Boys, who I have been woefully slow in getting on board with in my life.
Time well spent, in my opinion.
I think so. Yeah.
As anyone who's listened to our Tougher Than Leather episodes, there's rarely a time when I'm happier on this podcast than when I get the chance to talk about the Beastie Boys.
Excellent.
But who also, of course, have punk roots. They started as a hardcore punk band with Kate Schellenbach, who went on to be in Luscious Jackson. Yeah. They still retained a lot of punk connections throughout their career.
And interestingly, after the whole, I've boned up on the Beastie Boys. I didn't really intend to make such a big effort to bone up on them before your podcast. No offense, but I just became really interested, and I watched the was it an Apple documentary? It's not really a documentary film, but it's really a filmed performance of Adam Horowitz and Diamond on stage. Beastie Boys story, that's what it's called.
Spike Jonze, isn't it, who did that?
Yeah, I was slightly disappointed as a film because I was like, Spike Jonze, this is going to be amazing. And really, he's just filmed them on stage, which is fine. It's not really a movie in that sense. But if you want to learn about the Beastie Boys like I do, it was very useful. Got the whole story straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Well, I had my copy of Beastie Boys book, which is... an enormous, 550-page compendium of basically everything that Adam Horowitz, Adam Yauch, and Mike Diamond did, from their childhood through to the dissolution of the band after Yauch's death in 2012. And I searched through it for any mentions of Roadside Prophets, and there is not a goddamn thing about this film.
Yeah,
great book, but nothing about this.
Interesting. On Beastie Boys story, there is a little section of it where they're talking about that period in I think the timelines line up. I think it's the early 90s where Yauch got sort of a bit bored of it all and went off and caused all this. Is when they had the issues with Def Jam Records. And it sort of mentioned how Horowitz was starring in films, and they showed a clip from some film. I can't remember what it was. And they didn't mention this at all either. So it's really been wiped out of the zeitgeist, doesn't it?
Bizarre. Yeah. My guess is that the film they just showed a clip from is the lead role he had before this. which is a film that is extremely prestigious and yet disappeared completely, which is Lost Angels, where he co-starred with Donald Sutherland in a film by, get this, Hugh Chariots of Fire Hudson.
Wow. Okay. Well, that sounds very highbrow.
I mean,
well, not really, but
it's Hugh Hudson. You know,
maybe he was branching out. The only clip in this movie was him in a sports car with a girl, and she drives it over a fence and into a pool. That's all they showed. So I don't know what it was. If that was that, does that sound like a Hugh Hudson film? Is there a scene like that in Chariots of Fire? I think there might be.
There's nothing like that in Chariots of Fire, but weirdly there is a scene like that in his party election broadcast for Neil Kinnock.
Okay. Yeah, well, he was pushing for a new demographic, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was that red wedge either. He was trying to appeal to the youth.
That's right. Yeah, he looks really uncomfortable in that scene, I imagine.
This has really broke all records as the Pop Screen episode with the most Neil Kinnock references.
Already?
Episodes
it didn't take long.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was looking at his acting credits, and it does seem like he wanted to jump in with both feet to acting. Right. He did a Hugh Hudson film. You don't do a Hugh Hudson film with Donald Sutherland unless you're serious about working as an actor. He did Tougher Than Leather, where the band really just have comic cameos, but it's interesting that he gets the bulk of the sort of showcase comedy bits in that. And then he's in this. And after he's in this, he doesn't have another acting credit until 1999, which is the Beastie Boys guest appearance on Futurama.
Okay, right. I mean, I think he's so good in this movie. I think it's a genuinely really good performance. John Doe's pretty good too. He's slightly not wooden, but you know what I mean? It's not overly naturalistic from John Doe, but he's fine. I think he's good in the role. But Horowitz, I think, is terrific. It's one of those real full body performances, just in the way he walks around and moves his body. And I know, having seen the guy up on stage on the Beastie Boys show, that's not him. That's sort of related to his persona as Ad Rock.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a variation on that, isn't it? And he sort of does all the vocal stuff where he kind of not screams, but does that sort of wailing shout kind of way of speaking is a lot in this film. But I think it fits the role really well. And he's really quite, he's a really sympathetic figure. One of those, very Lynchian in a way. This feels like a very Lynchian sort of film, but he is a guy that I find develop a real fondness for as it goes along. I think he's great.
I didn't think of this when I was watching, but now we're talking about this and talking about Wild at Heart. Doesn't this kind of feel like a version of Wild at Heart when you follow Crispin Glover's cousin Dell around for the whole movie?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, if he sort of glommed onto a slightly less outlandish version of Sailor. It feels. Yeah, I mean, definitely. I always think of the scene in Big Tuna. It's an American. I really like. I've got this ambition to just drive around the desert in America, and I'll be really disappointed if I don't keep bumping into places like this, full of strange characters who sort of welcome me in and sort of speak philosophical stuff to me, possibly try and kill me if it's more like the Lynch film.
Totally. I mean, I think the big attraction of this as a filmmaker is that it allows you to just stuff the film with show-stopping cameos, which is certainly the case here.
Yeah, so I don't know. Do you know much about Abbe Wool, the director?
I do a bit, yeah. Did you know much about her?
All I know is she wrote or co-wrote Sid and Nancy for Alex Cox, and another film as well as this, which is another very 90s looking film that seems to have sunk without a trace, that Doesn't star anyone of note apart from Claudia Schiffer, of all people.
Right, okay.
That's all I know about her. I think she was a jobbing writer. I think she had a bit of a career in the 90s working on scripts, but generally in an uncredited way. So whether she was like a script doctor or not, or polishing things up, I'm not sure. But generally was knocking around Hollywood in this sort of phase as a writer. But she seems to have disappeared when the indie boom really kicked off. She seemed to have been working mostly before that.
Yeah, I found out a bit about her from a biography of Alex Cox that I have, not his autobiography, which is one of those books that I lent to a friend and never saw again, but a book about him. Abbe and Alex dated a bit back before their film careers started. They were both like on that LA punk scene, her because it's where she lived, Cox because he went there from Liverpool to study film.
Yeah.
They split up and then they got married, largely to get Alex a green card so he could work in America.
Okay. Right.
And yeah, they seem to remain very close. Abby's sort of career as a writer and director ended largely because she just got sick of dealing with producers and egos, and she went into working behind the scenes, mostly as an electrician of a general sort of rigor, which she says she enjoyed much more than putting up with rich assholes.
I did hear that she was an electrician, actually. Yeah, interesting. So just as the indie boom kicked off, she kind of dropped out, and I wonder if that has anything to do with the rise of the Weinsteins at that time.
Yeah, that story does make you reassess quite a lot of that 90s indie boom, doesn't it?
Yeah. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, I love. This is one of those films. It's one of those films that it's really difficult for me to explain why I love it so much. Now, and this is really something that's only hit me on a rewatch, because I think when I first watched this a few years ago, I gave it like 3.5 stars and thought, this is a nice little gem. I enjoyed it. On this rewatch, I came out of it thinking I absolutely loved that. I don't know if maybe because I'm about 5 or 6 years older than I was then, my nostalgia for the 90s is just getting more and more intense. I have noticed this as a general thing. I really miss the 90s. Every now and again, I'll watch a film that makes me not miss the 90s. I realize there's a lot of shit stuff in the 90s. But then you watch something like this and think, yeah, the 90s were really cool.
Yeah, totally. And I do think it's a flawed film. I do think 3.5 is a pretty fair rating, objectively, but these films sort of feel a bit more precious the further away we get from them. It's quite rare to see a film, particularly a sort of hip indie film, something on the cutting edge, that is just trying to sort of goof around and make you laugh. I think we should maybe have more films that aren't about very much.
Yeah. I noticed the other film that she wrote, I looked it up, Desperate But Not Serious, I think it's called, or Serious But Not Desperate, one of those two.
I saw that title, yeah.
Is directed by Bill Fishman, which again, you get the sort of link to the music industry. He was the director of Tapeheads, which is a film I just discovered recently, which is an 80s film, but feels a lot like this movie.
Yeah.
A little bit punk, that sort of boho Californian, that was just sort of breaking into the mainstream and formed the backbone of what became that kind of 90s indie sort of vibe, didn't it?
Tapeheads definitely feels like it's pushing towards that kind of, I guess you'd call it kind of transcendently dumb kind of 90s humor, doesn't it? That kind of Beavis and Butthead stuff where at the time people greeted it like it was the end of civilization, and looking back on it you think, oh no, this is quite a smart kind of comedy about dumb people.
And there's a really interesting through line there. You mentioned that makes me think of John Cusack, because as a kid, one of my favorite movies was Better Off Dead, which looks like a normal teen sex comedy, but was something more like Python. When you watched it, which I thought was awesome when I was a kid. And then he shows up in Tapeheads, and then he shows up in this as well, and is probably the funniest element in the film.
He is, yeah. I mean, he's kind of channeling one of the essential things about this kind of 90s culture, which sounds paradoxical when I say that this is distinctive to this decade, but it's the detritus of other decades. You know, there's this sense in the 90s of, oh, we're getting to the end of the 20th century. Didn't that suck? Here's all the stupid things we did in the 20th century. I think having a character who is pretending, I guess, to be part of the Symbionese Liberation Army is very much in that zeitgeist, I would say.
Symbionese, it doesn't mean anything, does it? Symbionese, does that have a relevance to you?
Oh yeah,
that
it
word,
does.
or
Yeah,
I assumed it was made up.
It sounds made up, and it's ridiculous enough to be made up. The Symbionese Liberation Army were a very small-time group of revolutionaries in the 1970s, who were. I think their founder was inspired by watching like the Omar Sharif movie about Che Guevara. So they didn't study Marxist theory at the feet of Castro or anything. They just went to the movies and decided to become revolutionaries. But for a while,
through the lens of Omar Sharif.
Yeah. For a while, they were taken very seriously by the authorities because they successfully kidnapped and brainwashed Patty Hearst.
Oh, that was those guys. Okay, right.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay, right.
And I think the Symbionese Liberation Army have a place in this kind of junk culture kind of canon because even by the jargon-laden standards of 60s and 70s revolutionaries, their communications were so incoherent. Cusack actually quotes one of them here. He said, "Death to the fascist insect that preys upon the life of the people," which was an actual SLA slogan. Because just throw that in there. You can't write anything funnier than that.
That's brilliant. I'm assuming free food for the poor was not a real Symbionese slogan.
It might have been. I don't want to rule it out.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most impressive things in this film is John Cusack's ability to stuff down about a couple of kilos of food. I know there's fast cutting, but even allowing for editing, he's fitting whole burgers in his mouth.
You talked about how you respond to this film differently as you get older. Like, if I was a teenager watching this, I would have just thought that was so cool. And I'm watching it in my 40s, and I'm just going to think he's going to be shitting blood all night.
If I watched that as a teenager, I would have thought, I reckon I could do that. At the moment, I was like, that would probably cause a heart attack if I tried to do that now.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, obviously there's a fair bit of it that's just fast cutting, but it's a staggering display of gluttony by anyone's standards.
It's pretty amazing. It's one of the best displays of gluttony I think I've seen in a film. I mean, Le Grand Bouffe would have benefited from a scene like that.
What's the glutton canon? There's Le Grand Bouffe, Monty Python's
Meaning of Life. Yeah, creosote. What else?
Stand By Me, the pie eating contest.
Yeah, the one that keeps jumping into my head is not a movie, but it's Homer Simpson hurriedly buttering his bread before he's eating breakfast. Don't fill up on bread. I don't know if you've seen this. It's a film we've covered on our podcast. It's a Bud Spencer and Terence Hill joint called Watch Out, We're Mad. Terence Hill in general would eat a lot, usually beans, very fast, sometimes in undercranked camera, very, very quickly. But in Watch Out, We're Mad, he and Bud Spencer have a hot dog and beer consuming contest about who gets to own a dune buggy.
I was really pleased when I saw La Chimera has like an undercranked scene.
Oh, nice. Bring it back.
Yeah, exactly. How long's it been since you've seen some proper speeded up motion?
Yeah, you think split screen and split diopters are slightly... Split diopters have come back in fashion. Split screen is still firmly out of fashion, it seems, although I say bring it back. Undercranked footage is way, way less fashionable than any of those. And it's going to take some bringing it back. But I personally welcome it.
I feel like Alice Rohrwacher probably has some canonical Italian neo-realist classic that inspired her to do it, but I guess people don't do it because everyone just thinks, "Oh, Benny Hill, it's Benny Hill now."
Unfortunately, Benny Hill it's become synonymous with Benny Hill, hasn't it? That's a bit of a shame.
Totally. I think it's telling that we haven't really addressed the plot of this film, and I don't think it's left a big hole in the podcast for us not doing this.
No, it's not really plot, but you know what? I think there is, and this might be my tendency to look for deeper meaning in films that may be shallow, but I really like. So I start to imagine things, but there's something going on. There is some sort of symbolism. There is some sort of allegory going on here between John Doe and Adam Horowitz that means something. And one of the things I noticed about the film is that I think, aside from one character, and I'm thinking about the cashier at the casino at the end, who is really upset about like having to ask for money for people who send themselves broke in the casino. Apart from her and our two main characters, everyone they meet is very sure of their place in the world. Seems to be a thread through them all, from the trainee manager at the Motel 9, obnoxiously so.
God,
I didn't get to be a trainee manager by breaking rules. Through to David Carradine, who we haven't mentioned, who shows up as a sort of hippie musician in a caravan. Arlo Guthrie, Timothy Leary, warning them of the dangers of speed.
Very funny, yes.
Yeah. Even Stephen Tobolowsky as the aggrieved park ranger who's worried about the health of his the beavers in his park.
Yes.
Jennifer Balgaman's stripper. She knows what she's doing. Even the kid at the end, the schoolgirl that's hitchhiking. She's pretty clear what she's doing. You've got Sam, Adam Horowitz. He's got no idea what he's doing, and he's latched on to John Doe. And John Doe is a guy who sort of seems at the beginning of the film to think he knows what he's doing, but actually he's in a dead-end job. He's very unhappy. Although he keeps expressing his need to get back to his job, he doesn't really want to, and he's actually happy to be drifting around the desert. There's definitely a search for meaning, which I think is another thing that characterizes these sorts of films that we're talking about, which is kind of finding yourself. But it feels very stark here on a rewatch. It's although it doesn't have a coherent arc in a way, it seems to be very clearly trying to be a metaphor for that. And I was just going to say, and the relationship between Sam and Joe is, well, it's not what makes it work. What makes it work is everything else. But having those guys at the core of it is the closest it comes to succeeding in, okay, I understand the thesis of this film. I'm still not sure I understand it, but I feel like there is something there other than just goofing around and being quirky and 90s.
I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, I think what I kept thinking about is how clear the shared sense of humor between Alex Cox and Abbe Wool is, because it's not like a situation where one of them is like adding this element. Alex Cox's films without Abbe Wool are like this, and this is an Abbe Wool film without Alex Cox, even if it shares a lot of his actors. But you can see bits of it where you think, oh, right, that's the kind of joke you would get in an Alex Cox film. And one of them is the absurdity of trying to ascribe too much meaning to an event. You know, it's like in Repo Man, where Duke gets shot and he has that monologue about how, in many ways, it's society that brought me to this fate. And you've got the county sheriff here who talks like, I suppose he talks like the generation of artists who would come up after this, you know, that kind of 90s new French extremity scene that were always big at Cannes, or the Dogma guys who were, he talks about, I'm seeing the hideous truth of society's thirst for blood. And what he's actually doing is just beating up this completely innocent guy for, I think, trespassing, it turns out to be.
Did you recognize that actor? What's his name?
I didn't recognize him. No.
Oh, I've forgotten his name, and he's not even listed in Letterboxd, but he is the doctor from The Exorcist.
Really?
Yeah. And he's unrecognizable. And he's also, because we just covered, just last week, we posted our episode on Night of the Juggler, and he plays a preacher whose car James Brolin steals and drives along with him for a bit in that. His face in the early 80s, late 70s, or 70s and early 80s will be very familiar to you, but he looks nothing like that in this film. Completely different.
No, I would never have, I've seen The Exorcist a lot of times, as I'm sure a lot of people have, but yeah, I'd never recognized him. I guess his MO is torturing young people. That's what he does best on screen.
I guess so, yeah. Call him in.
I love that it just turns out to be trespassing too. It made me think immediately. There's this very bleakly funny bit in John Ronson's essay about Jonathan King, where he's talking to one of King's associates, and I can't remember exactly who it is, so I'm not going to say, oh, he's guilty of this horrible thing. But everyone around Jonathan King was kind of shady at that point. Right. And there's a wonderful bit where this guy goes, anyway, he's talking about someone who'd accused King. And he goes, anyway, I found out what he'd done. And let me tell you, it put anything we did to shame. There's just this very Ronsonian pause. He goes, shoplifting.
Nice. Hang on, Manny Chevrolet, is that his name? No, that's someone else. No, Manny Chevrolet's in the band. This is the two Free Stooges. This band is that you see at one of the. This is another thing I want to do in America. I want to go to Vegas and go to a very down at hill bar and see a band like that playing.
Also a very Repo Man joke, isn't it? It's very much like the Circle Jerks cameo in Repo Man, where they become this really horrible lounge band.
Yeah, honestly, it wouldn't be surprising if Emilio Estevez and Harry Dean Stanton hadn't showed up in one scene and be shouting after Jennifer Balgobin, "I'll make you a repo wife," or something like that.
Yeah,
it would have totally fit.
Yeah, completely. I think a lot of those guys, I suppose I often say this about people who are closely associated with a good director, and they sort of get stereotyped as the people who only appear in such and such as films. At the moment, I'm thinking about this in terms of Peter Strickland. I don't know why people don't cast Fatma Mohamed in everything. She's incredible.
100%. She is amazing. And is she in anything other than Peter Strickland films? I don't think I've seen her in anything else.
I couldn't tell you. I definitely haven't seen her in anything else, but yeah, I feel the same way about the gang who were around Alex Cox in these. Jennifer Balgobin is great in this. She's so good.
Yeah.
And you've even got a little cameo from Dick Rude in the two Free Stooges.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just think, why weren't these people everywhere? Why did people not see Repo Man and think, holy shit, we've got to cast these people in?
Yeah. Going back to Fatma Mohamed, because he even gave her a nice juicy lead role in his last film. Is it his last one, Flux Gourmet? And I was like,
yeah.
Oh, she'll be in loads of stuff now, but not. She'll probably show up in the next Peter Strickland film.
I'm thinking about the big scene she has in Flux Gourmet, and I'm sort of, you couldn't put it in your show reel, could you? Maybe that's what's kind of holding her back.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. Oh, she's great. She's so great. I love Strickland.
Yeah, same here. But these things do happen occasionally. I remember I used to think it about back in the 2000s. I used to think this about Shane Meadows as a regular cast, and now they are in everything.
Yeah.
Stephen Graham, Vicky McClure, Paddy Considine. People recognise them in the end.
Yeah, seems to happen via TV in the UK.
Yeah, I think getting a regular role in a cop show seems to be the thing that really puts you over the edge. But
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was
that's worked
there
for
all
Vicky McClure,
along.
hasn't it? She's become very TV.
Yeah. Maybe that's what we need. Maybe we just need Fatma Mohamed investigates. Dot.
That'll be the next.
That'll be
She can be a sort of, I don't know, shabbily dressed detective in Northumberland or something like that. You know.
I want her to play it like a character in Fabric. I want her to just like glide into the crime scene and make a series of incomprehensible
Yeah,
pronouncements.
say cryptic shit, and everyone goes, "Oh my god, she's solved the murder." I don't know how.
Yeah, you sort of sped through a lot of the cameos in there, which are all, I think, worthy of isolating. The
Yes.
Timothy Leary one it's one of those very self-indulgent kind of 90s things, isn't it? Where you've cast someone and there isn't a joke unless you recognize who they've cast. But
Yeah.
if you do recognize who they've cast, it's good
Yeah.
stuff.
And the first time I watched this film, I had no idea what Timothy Leary looked like, so that went completely over my head. And it was only on rewatch I was like, "Oh, that's Timothy Leary. Oh, Speed. Okay, I get it now."
Yes, yeah. But also very sort of Abbe Wool, Alex Cox kind of sense of humour, isn't it? About the people who you expect to be absolute freaks turn out to be very straight-laced, and the people you expect to, like the officer, the people you
Yeah.
expect to be very disciplined are absolutely bizarre weirdos.
Yeah. And authority as this, it's insanity through order. Like the
Yes.
trainee manager at the Motel 9, who, even though he's got a customer asking for a ground level room, says, "I'm sorry, but the policy is that we spread people evenly. There's only 2 people in the motel. I've already put someone downstairs. You have to go upstairs," and is offended that
Yeah.
he objects to that.
Because to him, he literally calls it a religious code of ethics. That it's like blasphemy to go against his code of appointing rooms.
Yeah. Which, of course, makes this very sane because that is, and particularly when you look at the States, but it's everywhere. I don't want to single out the States, but let's single out the States. That sort of way of thinking, it's not gone away. It prevails there massively. In, you know, the land of the free, maybe not so free sometimes.
The kind of you are your job thing, the idea that even if
Yeah.
you're doing something as sort of, I don't want to say trivial, I'd hate to live in a society without hotel clerks, but
Yes.
it's not important in the grand scheme of things, but you are under a capitalist system supposed to find fulfillment in what you do. So
Mhm.
how do you stack that up? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess most of the other characters that they come across are people who've also dropped out to a certain extent. He's a bit of an unusual character, that one, because
Mm,
you've got the David Carradine character, he's dropped out. You've got, later on we meet Lynn Shay and Bill Cobbs, there's 2 we haven't mentioned yet, who
yes,
have
yeah.
dropped out of society and seem, and they're both dying, one of cancer, one of AIDS.
Yeah.
And you've got this, I don't know if it's a joke. I think it is a joke, but it's the sort of black humor that would be worthy of a sort of Chris Morris's Jam or something. They're blissfully, happily waiting to die together.
Yeah. Jam is such a good example because Jam and Blue Jam have that sort of, they often have sketches about people who've just locked into this obviously toxic relationship and they're just going to follow through the logic of it
Yes.
until it finishes one or both of them off. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking of the, the businessman in the prime of life who decides I should get my funeral out of the way while I'm in the prime
Yes.
of my life. And it's these ideas that you can see how they've come to the idea, but it's so obviously insane that it
Yeah.
becomes
Yeah.
horrifying that they're actually doing it. That's Jam to a T.
Yeah.
I mentioned Jam because I don't think we got Chris Morris anything in Australia when I was growing up. I would
Right.
have loved it. And you were on my podcast and you said something about Chris Morris's Jam, which I just let go through to the keeper when we were talking. And when I was editing, I was like, what's Chris Morris's Jam? And I Googled it. The next thing I know, all the episodes are on YouTube, and I've watched every single one. It's the most genius thing I've seen in years. Incredible. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm so happy to turn someone else onto it. Not least because even by Chris Morris standards, it's the one I have a tough time recommending to people.
Oh yeah.
there's a lot of stuff there that I don't necessarily want the world to see. It's representative of my tastes.
Yes. So you find this funny, do you, Graham? Yeah, amazing stuff. But yeah, there is that note of very black comedy, which I love. It's most pronounced in that scene. Actually, it is kind of horrific. And you've got Lin Shaye, talking about how she was on the smack and then she got off it, but it turns out she had AIDS anyway, so it was all too late. And it's just like, wow, okay, crazy.
Yeah. And I think the sort of attitude in this that I guess is particularly 90s is that there's nothing lamer to a sort of 90s indie comedy than searching for actual meaning in something. The officer is a joke, not just because he's a violent police officer, although aged well, hasn't it? But he has this ridiculous idea that what he's doing is some form of social critique that sets him above other men. And the fact that he sounds like an artist when he's doing it is kind of Abbe Wool's thesis statement in a lot of ways. She's saying, if I was shit at my job, if I was a terrible writer, this is the kind of crap I would say. But in the end, while I think you're right, you can see further meaning in Roadside Prophets. Part of that meaning is just ultimately that life's meaningless and you might as well just drift along with it.
Yeah, I think there's something there about getting back to what I was saying about everyone seeming to know what they're doing. I think that surely must be, it can't be just me who's gone through life wondering at everyone's apparent knowledge and conviction of what they're doing in their life. Because a lot of those people, as you get older, you realize, all those people that I thought had it figured out, they have a nervous breakdown, or they, God forbid, commit suicide. These sorts of things happen. You realize you don't know what's going through anyone's head. People are generally unknowable at the end of the day. But in order to survive, we adopt this facade of, I know what I'm doing. Yeah, it's all in hand, which actually just makes everyone else feel a little bit more insecure because they're like, well, why do I not know what I'm doing? That can't be just me.
No, I sometimes wonder what it would be like to grow up in an era when phrases like imposter syndrome are common currency, because let me tell you, if I'd have been aware that was a thing when I was in my early 20s and doing my first jobs, life would have been a lot easier.
Yeah. Oh, this is normal. Okay.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. There are other people who think that they're just stealing a living like me. Yeah.
Although surely for the younger generation today, says old man Rob on his porch, it must be more apparent, because even our highest authority figures clearly have no fucking idea what they're doing. It's very obvious.
Yeah, there is that aspect to it. I remember thinking that when I look back to the 90s, I try and one of the things that I'm observing looking back is that I felt very confused in a way that I wouldn't have been able to articulate, because a bit of what you're seeing happening now, a bit of that firewall between respectable society and crazy people was kind of falling away. When I was in my teens in the 90s, and when you're in your teens, you look to media in part to see what a sensible adult is and what you should model yourself on. And in the 90s, it felt like quite a lot of the sensible adults in the media thought that a video of an alien autopsy was real. So you can't really do much sort of gauging of what sensible adulthood means when I remember looking back, it's incredible. There was a whole BBC primetime special where David Frost and Uri Geller were talking about psychic powers and doing experiments that you can do at home. And you think it felt more like a spoof of Ghost Watch than Ghost Watch felt like a parody of the actual TV.
You needed to back that up with his Johnny Carson appearance to make you realize that maybe people do realize this is all bullshit.
Yeah. There was a deep unseriousness about the 90s, which is sometimes bad. I would have preferred not to have this. As the millennium got closer, I did have this little voice in the back of my head going, it's probably not, but what if Nostradamus was right? A lot of grown-ups seem to think he's right. Sometimes that unseriousness produces something like Roadside Prophets, which is kind of delightful.
Yeah, I mean, when I was, how old? So I was about 17 when this came out. So the 90s for me was me getting more into my early 20s. So sort of similar to being a teenager, but with more agency, because the law decides that you're a grown up now when you feel anything but you can do whatever you want. And that was, I feel lucky to have been that age in the 90s, because there was something in the air. And I think this film is an example of one of the artifacts of that period of kind of rebelling against and ridiculing the institutions of society. I mean, that had happened earlier as well. Certainly happened in the 70s and the 60s. Yeah. But in the 90s, it was in a more knowing way, and maybe even a fatalistic way to go, this is what we're stuck with, but let's just laugh at it and not have respect for it, at least. And, the 90s were like the end of history. There was no, this was before 9/11, and, this is before the post-truth world, and this is before the internet. We were sort of excited about the advent of the internet because it meant everyone would be able to communicate with each other, and now we found out that that's just a really bad idea. Everyone should shut up. So there was a weird aimlessness to it, which was like, and I'm conflating here. I'm projecting, because I was aimless at that time and quite comfortable with being aimless. I mean, I remember having a conversation once with someone I was trying to pick up a girl in a bar one night, and she was a real kind of social warrior type person, and she'd been going on and on about all the great stuff she was doing. She's like, what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, I just want to be on holiday. I don't care. I don't do anything. I have a good time. And
I mean, that in itself could be in an Abbe Wool or Alex Cox script, couldn't it? That anecdote.
It was uncomfortable, I think, because I was late getting to Eraserhead, and I think I watched Eraserhead about that time, and the scene where he goes to meet the parents and they say, what do you do? And he says, I'm on vacation, which is just one of the funniest lines ever. And I was like, shit, that's me.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think before we sort of wind down, we should talk a bit more about the Beastie Boys as part of this 90s zeitgeist, because they really hit a lot of points on that kind of cool alternative 90s checklist very, very early on. Like, Paul's Boutique came out in 1989, and that's already got a lot of what will come next locked in place there.
I remember, I think, was I telling you this over email? I don't know if this came up, but I remember thinking I wasn't into License to Ill. I didn't really hear it. I knew Fight for Your Right to Party, and it was fine as a party song. Yeah. But I assumed they were a bunch of buffoons. And I remember listening to, I used to listen to alternative radio. Like, one of the things I discovered in my teens, we had an alternative radio station in Australia called Triple J, which used to be a lot cooler than it is now, but it used to play fairly obscure stuff and just get you totally off the mainstream path and discover all sorts of stuff that's out there musically. And I remember they profiled Paul's Boutique when it came out, and I was like, "What? This is the Beastie Boys? This is amazing! Like, these guys are smart. These guys are musicians. These guys are doing something interesting." I then didn't really listen to them much. I just picked up whatever was out there. So obviously, I loved Sabotage as much as the next man. when it came out. I watched the video for it about 1 million times because it was one of the funniest things I'd ever seen.
It's incredible. Yeah.
So I knew all their big hits, but yeah, they clearly, the experimentation that they were going through is really quite extraordinary. And like I said, because this gave me an excuse to go, I mean, one of the problems with it's not a problem, or it's a first world problem. Things like Spotify and the media and the internet that we've got today, like my issue in music now has become, what do I narrow it down to? And it's become very wayward. I kind of go with the flow. And so for the last week, I've just been listening to the Beastie Boys constantly because I had an excuse to sort of zero in on them, and I've been loving it.
I'm really glad.
Because I've gotten into Paul's Boutique and Ill Communications so heavily, I haven't really listened to much else. But it's good enough. I should listen to some more of their stuff, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's an interesting sort of jump as well between Paul's Boutique and even on the next album, Check Your Head, something is happening, which I always say is one of my favorite sort of illustrations of how art works, which is that after Paul's Boutique, which is that really dense sound collage, there's one song with about 6 or 7 Beatles samples, because sampling at that point was unregulated. All of the test cases hadn't gone through yet.
All right.
And then, of course, by the time they had to record the follow-up album, suddenly there were people being like sued for hundreds of thousands for unlicensed sampling. So they decided, well, we'll just teach ourselves to play. Like, how hard can it be? And of course, when you want to recreate like 70s funk or hard rock, the musicians playing those are actually usually really good, but they always said we got to our own sound through incompetence. You know, we quickly realized that we couldn't play like the house band at Stax, but something else was happening, and maybe we could loop that, and it could be the start of something else. You know?
Yeah. Quite amazing, really. I remember when you were talking about the copyright crackdown. Is this Vanilla Ice's fault? Did he start that by saying that he didn't sample Queen?
I think that probably, that would be when I think about the big copyright clashes. There's 3 big cases that stick out. There's Vanilla Ice with Under Pressure on Ice Ice Baby. A Tribe Called Quest got in major fucking trouble for sampling the bass line to Walk on the Wild Side on Can I Kick It? Which I always think was wild because Lou Reed was asking for like the whole of the royalties for that. And I thought, well, 1, you didn't write the rap. 2, you didn't even play that fucking bass line. That was a session player. You know, I love the Velvet Underground as much as anyone, but I just thought, what a dick move.
It was probably written by Bowie anyway, wasn't it? That's on Transformer, wasn't it?
Probably, a lot of that stuff is. But
I told you we'd get Bowie into this discussion somehow.
We've got Bowie. We've got a weird number of Neil Kinnock references. Chris Morris, just need to work Doctor Who in and we can call it a day.
Done it. You've done it. You have done it. Well done.
The other one was Biz Markie, the Beastie Boys associate, getting sued by Gilbert O'Sullivan, which is such a bizarrely uncool thing to get in a fight.
I know, it's what an embarrassing person to get sued by. Sadly. Oh yeah. But
the like flip side to this is that when there were rumblings about Paul's Boutique, and when there were interviewers saying, well, if you make another album like this, you'll be sued. Have you been contacted by anything? There were rumors about the Sounds of Science that Apple Music had put out feelers about suing for that, and I can't remember which of them said it, but one of the Beastie Boys said, what's cooler than being sued by the fucking Beatles?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, there was one of the cases that caught my eye was Men at Work, the Down Under song. Is it called Down Under? You know the one.
I think it is. Yeah.
They ended up getting sued because they use a melody out of Kookaburra Sits in the Old Gum Tree, which I thought was just a traditional song, but apparently its rights are owned by the Church of England in Australia or something, Anglican Church in Australia. and they sued them. And what's his name? Is it Colin Innes, the singer? He got interviewed after it, and he was like, "Yeah, they brought this suit, so we just went to court." And I said, "Yeah, I just copied it off that song because I will just tell the truth." Probably could have said it was just a coincidence because it's pretty simple. And he's like, "Oh, fair enough," but he's like, "Yeah, so we did copy it, so they won, so that's fair enough." But basically, I've got no money now. They'd like got all my money. I was like, "Okay, that just doesn't seem right." Really? I mean, honestly, it's like that song wouldn't have existed without the Anglican Church having this ditty in their name. I mean, come on. No one's been ripped off here.
Looking at, the statistics about congregations, that is probably keeping the Anglican Church afloat at the moment.
They're desperate. They're pouring through every song that's been a #1 hit in the last 30 years to go, can you pick up a tune that sounds a bit like a psalm or something?
Yeah, it was fun for me researching this, really, because when the Beastie Boys were active, I didn't, at least. I didn't really think about the Beastie Boys as like individuals, because they seemed like they were an example of the band as a really tight gang.
Yeah, definitely.
They were like a hydra.
For me, I don't even really recognize the other guys other than Ad Rock, because he just seemed to be the face of them. He's the one you noticed. He had the visual persona. Oh, yeah. Also Yuck, I guess. But yeah, that's so. When I first saw this film and I heard there was a guy from the Beastie Boys in it, like I spotted him immediately who that was. But I don't know if I would have recognized the other two if they were in it.
Yeah, maybe not. And I suppose that's part of why you got into acting, because it's screen presence, right? It's knowing how to carry yourself on camera in a way that draws attention.
He's a guy, by the way, in this Beastie Boys story film, where you watch him speak on stage, and he's clearly like, a really intelligent, really articulate guy. And it's not that he looks ancient. He's just as old as you would expect him to be at this point. But I cannot square it with the same. It's not the same guy. It just doesn't seem like the same guy to me. He speaks completely different. He sort of looks subtly different. I'm like, is that actually him? I was watching the film thinking, is that actually Adam Horowitz? He just seems completely different now. Which goes to show he's probably doing more physically, which I think I would have assumed from watching Beastie Boys video that's just what he's like. But it's clearly not what he's like.
No, 100%. But, I suppose the other thing is that the Beastie Boys did wind it up after the death of Adam Yauch, and that was, 14 years ago this year. So there's been a good stretch where they've essentially been aging off camera, and it's always quite shocking when people do that. You're used to a celebrity being someone you watch get older or watch get more obvious plastic surgery in several cases.
Yeah. Have you seen any pictures of Al Pacino lately? Bloody hell, I got a shock when I saw a picture of him recently.
I think the best comment I ever read about Al Pacino was that he went into acting because it's the only profession which doesn't require that you comb your own hair.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, I think we could wrap up here with something which I think is a really affirmative thing, which is that sometime in the 2010s, I remember Mike Diamond being interviewed, and this was after Adam Yauch's death and after the Beastie Boys had split up, and he was described as a former Beastie Boy, and he went and got the paper to print a retraction saying Mike Diamond is and always will be a Beastie Boy.
Yeah, nice.
Lovely. Yeah. Any closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I mean, I would urge people to go check this out. This is definitely a film that needs more attention. And if I just realized we even missed a musician reference. This is a guy you could do an entire series on in terms of his film and TV appearances. Flea.
Flea. Yes.
This must be one of his first roles, I think, if you can call it a role.
Flea is like the king of doing very odd cameos, isn't he? In everything from The Big Lebowski to Babylon, he will just turn up, give you that brief moment of going, "Is that Flea?" And then
Yeah.
he vanishes. The Scarlet Pimpernel of pop star cameos.
He was in that bloody not that I watched it, I was unfortunate enough to watch the first episode of it, that Obi-Wan show on Disney Plus. I think he's one of a fairly prominent cast member in that. Yeah.
Why not? I guess when Disney's Star Wars series have had Werner Herzog as like one of the big bads, all bets are off, aren't they?
Yeah, really. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of content out there they've got to fill up. That means there's a lot of work for actors, I guess. That's a good thing about it. Not that I'll be watching.
Yeah. I also think it's kind of. I was talking to Rob about this, or other Rob Simpson, about this when we did an episode about David Yao from the Jesus Lizard, which is on our Patreon, if anyone's interested. But we said that if you want someone who has a memorable kind of wonky, grizzled character actor face, you've sort of got to go for a rock star these days, because there's no actors in Hollywood of any age who look like that now. And I think Flea has a good kind of offbeat face.
That's a good point, because you can't even wait for them to get old, because they just look the same because of whatever thing they're doing. I mean, Roseanne probably thinks they're eating babies or something. I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing something to get themselves young. Until I've been waiting and waiting for Tom Cruise to become an old man. I think he's just about to do it. He's
on the verge, isn't he? There were moments in the last Mission Impossible where I thought there's a bit of waddle around the neck coming in.
Yeah. You're gonna see. It's like Al Pacino. You sort of see a photo of him, and he's gonna be literally like walking around with a walking frame, and it's this little old man. Yeah.
Hey, there's something that we haven't mentioned that we should say before we go. This was, I believe, not the first, but one of the first film roles for Don Cheadle.
Yes, that's right. I think it might have been his first role. I heard that anyway. We didn't talk about that Happy Days type bar where they go, which again, a little bit of the very Alex Cox humor. Apart from the cook, who was a white guy, but all the staff in there were black, which just reminded me of that Chris Rock gag about why there are no black people in Happy Days. And he said, well, in 1957 or whatever it was, those were happy days for black guys. So I'm sure that's part of that as well.
Yeah. It's very, I guess it's conceptually similar to what he would do in Boogie Nights, where he's playing that guy who always gets told off for listening to country music.
Yeah,
like, you're black. What are you doing?
Yeah, definitely. Why are you working at this bar? Yeah.
Yeah, well, Rob, just give people a little reminder of where they can find you online.
Yeah, definitely. Check me out on Caliber 9 from Outer Space podcast. It's on all the main podcatchers. We do that weekly, myself and my co-host Joe. We talk about cult and exploitation movies, very broadly defined. And we range from fairly well-known movies, like we've been doing some of the lesser-loved James Bond films recently, to stuff that I guarantee someone, I don't care who it is, we've got to have done a film that you've never heard of, even if you're into really obscure stuff. So we do that as well. We'll do a double feature, and we just basically talk about it and have a bit of a laugh. And we always have a guest. We've had Graham on before. Graham's going to be on soon too. Yes. Probably a few weeks after this posts, I think, by the time that one posts. But yeah, our latest episode, we did a grimy New York crime film pairing of The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 and The Night of the Juggler. So that's
quite grimy.
Very grimy. Yes, that's right. You can run your finger along the screen and it comes away looking black. Great films. And I think, what do we got coming up next week? We're doing, weirdly for us, because he's not really a Caliber 9 from Outer Space style director, but we're doing a, I'm blanking on his name, Stephen Frears double feature with The Grifters and The Hits.
Fabulous.
Memoirs he did. Yeah. So we do crime, horror, Italian exploitation, Hong Kong, like all that sort of stuff. It's too numerous to mention, but yeah, check us out. That's up every week, and that's the main place. You can also find me on Letterboxd. I am Mosquito Dragon on Letterboxd, and I have written way too much material on Letterboxd. I think I'm shooting towards 6,000 reviews, so I'm getting there.
I hope your Stephen Frears episode has some mentions of his work with the comic strip Presents.
It does. I'm a massive fan of Mr. Jolly Lives Next Door.
Yes.
Which apparently Stephen Frears loathed.
Yeah, he apparently did not get it, but in a weird way that makes it work. It's like
probably does, yeah.
If everyone's on the same page, sometimes it's too easy. There's no sort of effort in it. Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine that set with Rick Mayall and Peter Cook and Adrian Edmondson? I mean, someone's got to be taking themselves seriously, otherwise nothing watchable.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah, as for me, I have a website, grahamwilliamsonfilms.com, where you can find about upcoming screenings of my BFI Our Film Heritage backed short, Song of the Suburbs, and anything else I'm doing. I'm also on Letterboxd. Like Rob, I've written far too much for free, but it's all there. Just search for Graham Williamson, or on Instagram at Graham Williamson Films. In a couple of weeks' time, we'll be back with an episode with other Rob Simpson, on Jim Jarmusch's Dead Man, and its excellent cameo from Iggy Pop in a dress and a bonnet.
I love Iggy Pop in that movie. He's so great.
He's wild, isn't he, with his little Bible stories.
He makes really nice beans.
Yes, Terence Hill would approve. He'd eat them in double quick time.
Yeah, he'd be very gracious. Billy Bob Thornton would be proud of Terence Hill. You got to watch the film to know what the fuck we're talking about.
I've watched the film and I'm not quite sure where we're headed with this, but it's yes.
I'm just bailing. I don't know where we're headed either.
Yeah, but we'll be back in a couple of weeks' time with that. We also have bonus episodes out at www.patreon.com/The Geek Show. But until next time, I've been Graham.
And I've been Rob, and we'll continue to be Rob.